network. The Natural Gas Infrastructure Modernization Partnership works with others, including federal agencies, looking at ways we can help NARUC members and work with other agencies like PHMSA to help establish natural gas pipeline leak measurement protocols and identify opportunities for new technologies and cost-effective practices for enhancing pipeline safety, efficiency, and deliverability. I'm the chair of the Natural Gas Modernization Infrastructure Partnership, and I also serve as the co-vice chair of the NARUC Committee on Gas, and as chair is the Pipeline Safety Voluntary Information Sharing System Working Group with PHMSA. This webinar today is going to focus on DOE and PHMSA's Interagency Task Force on Natural Gas Storage Safety final report on the Aliso Canyon natural gas leak and resulting actions. Participants from both agencies will cover a brief introduction to natural gas storage regulation, specifics on the Aliso Canyon leak and response from the report, and implications for the electric system reliability and the gas electric market, as well as looking at potential recommendations to advance well integrity and other gas electric reliability, and the status of the interim rules revising federal pipeline safety regulations. We have a full complement of speakers today, and we're going to get started first with Dr. James Bradbury, Senior Advisor, Energy Policy and Systems Analysis with the U.S. Department of Energy.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Berman, and thanks everyone for joining the webinar. Just have a couple slides for you today to set the stage for today's discussion and to briefly introduce you to some related ongoing work by the U.S. Department of Energy. Next slide. So the Task Force on Natural Gas Storage Safety is co-chaired by DOE and PHMSA. That's, of course, the subject of this webinar, and their work was done with input provided by various other federal agencies, and also conducted in close collaboration with the state of California, LA County, and, of course, the city of Los Angeles as well. Task force work included several studies, research, and analysis, in addition to some public webinars that were designed to inform recommended actions and policies to help improve the electricity sector reliability, well integrity, emergency response planning, and also, of course, public health and safety of natural gas storage facilities. So the task force conducted this work over the course of about 6 months and released their final report in November of last year. So the next slide. So this slide just shows the location of natural gas storage working capacity by state. And so it also provides a breakdown by owner type to illustrate where capacity is owned by local distribution companies, LDCs, versus non-LDCs. And so for the purpose of this webinar, the main purpose of this slide is really just to inform state public utility commissions and their staff where they may have natural gas storage facilities operating within their jurisdictions and subject to their oversight, which, as it turns out, accounts for almost 1/3 of total working gas capacity in the U.S. Okay, next slide. So I'd just like to draw your attention to some related program activities at the U.S. Department of Energy through our Natural Gas Modernization Initiative. This includes ARPA-E's Monitor Program, which supports the development of low-cost methane sensing technologies for the oil and gas sectors, as well as the establishment of an independent field test site, which is actually just becoming operational really as we speak. So this spring, and doing some field tests over the course of this week in Colorado. The Office of Fossil Energy also has a complementary program funded with FY16 funding focused on advancing methane mitigation technologies and also methane emissions quantification efforts. I'll also note that in 2014 and 2015, DOE worked with the FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to develop a policy statement on cost recovery for investments in FERC jurisdictional midstream natural gas infrastructure, in particular investments to improve safety and reduce environmental performance, and to improve environmental performance. And the last slide, well, I guess I'll put in a plug for the DOE NARUC partnership, which of course Commissioner Berman already introduced. So I'll just say that I'll hope you'll stay tuned for future webinars on this topic. We'll welcome your feedback and suggestions on technical assistance that DOE could provide to NARUC and its members on the important subject of natural gas infrastructure modernization. And the last slide is just contact information for me and my colleague Christopher Freitas in the Office of Oil and Natural Gas and Fossil Energy. And I look forward to hearing from the rest of the presenters.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to Dr. Grant Bromhall, who's with the Senior Research Fellow, National Energy Technology Laboratory with the U.S. Department of Energy. Doctor.
All right. Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone who's here listening in. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the wellbore integrity work that was done here at DOE. We can move on to the next slide. So just a little bit of background. You've heard some of this already. I think everyone knows that the Aliso Canyon incident began on October 23rd in 2015, and from there till the end of that year, there were several kill attempts to stop the leakage from the well that became more and more aggressive and ended up, in some cases, exacerbating the actual release of the methane. Finally, they were able to plug that well by drilling a relief well from a different location down to intersect the original well on February 17th, but not before around 90,000 tons of gas leaked out of the well over that 4-month period. At this time, the DOGR in the state of California consulted with 3 of our national labs that are in California, Berkeley, Livermore, and Sandia national labs to help with the understanding of what was happening there at Aliso Canyon. And in April of 2016, this has already been mentioned before, there was a task force that was initiated, and DOE had 3 well, there were 3 different sort of subgroups within that task force. The one I worked on was the wellbore integrity one, and then which I'm talking about now, and I think David Meyer will be speaking about the reliability work that was done. So I was at NETL. We joined with those other 3 labs to form that well integrity team to look at the Aliso incident and to evaluate an understanding of the infrastructure across the country and provide some recommendations. So next slide, please. So this is just a schematic of the SS25 well at the Aliso Canyon field that where the leak occurred. It was one of 114 gas storage wells across the field. Somewhat typical. It had a history somewhat typical of other wells in the field. It was originally an oil well drilled back in the 40s. It was converted to gas storage in 1973. It was last inspected in 79, and then they had some logs that were taken since then. They had production. It was a complicated flow path in the system because they had some tubing in the well, but they produced through all the different the pieces within the system. This is a common thing in gas storage wells. They're still working on the formal root cause analysis associated with this, but part of the issue was this complicated structure downhole, and that was one of the reasons why it was so difficult to kill, to stop the leak. Next slide, please. So the current status of Aliso is that since that one well the leak was stopped there and it was shut in, SoCalGas has petitioned the regulator to reopen part of the field for injections. 41 of the 114 wells have passed all the pressure tests that were associated there. There's some new operating procedures for those wells. and they've replaced all the tubing in those wells so that now there's multiple barriers for the gas to go through before it could be released. They do, and all these wells are also monitored for pressure continuously. There are some daily infrared thermal imaging scanning, continuous scanning at the surface to detect any leaks that might be coming out of the ground across the site. And the new field working gas storage capacity, it's going to be capped. So originally the capacity was about 86 BCF. There's a significantly, the new capacity is going to be less than that. And we don't know exactly what that will be yet. Next slide, please. So what about other sites, underground gas storage sites across the world? There are about 415 storage facilities with over 17,000 wells across the U.S. The Aliso Canyon is not the first major incident that's happened in the last 15 years. There are a couple other notable ones. You see on the bottom right a picture of what happened in Hutchinson, Kansas, with the Aggie field, where there were actual explosions at some places in the town because of the failure there. There has been some work done on estimating failure incidents, but it's very incomplete. It's really only major incidents, and minor incidents are not really very well collected and categorized. But there are some numbers here from some studies that we found on the bottom left. Next slide, please. But one thing that we found is that for looking across the U.S. and the infrastructure, this really is an aging infrastructure. A lot of the gas storage wells, 80% are in originally oil and gas fields, and so a lot of those have been converted from oil and gas wells to gas storage operations, and in some cases that wasn't necessarily an easy conversion, such as what you saw at Aliso. About 15% of the wells are older than were originated in 1921, so that was when the original sort of cement to create a barrier to flow was put in place regularly. And then 80% of the wells are more than 35 years old. And so it's fairly common, like you saw at Aliso Canyon, to see gas produced through wells that have both the casing and the tubing in them, and it's produced through both of those, so that if the casing fails, then you get a direct leak from the well into the environment. But there are some who do produce through just the tubing in between, so there's multiple barriers there. It is the case that there's lots of gas storage fields that have other oil and gas wells in those storage fields because of their history. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to briefly mention there was a well integrity workshop that this team put together back in July of last year. There's a link to it on the bottom. We had a lot of good representation across the spectrum of stakeholders, from operators to regulators to researchers and consultants. There were quite a number of opinions that were heard and were captured in the report that we put together. We talked quite a bit about the API 1170, 1171 practices that they published and that are the basis for well, you'll hear about those later, but there was a lot of good discussion around those. But I recommend, if you want to get some more details on what was said at that meeting, all the presentations were on that website. Next slide, please. So finally, I'll go to some of the recommendations that our team put together. We have three different topic areas. One is on directly on wellbore integrity and what should be done to address the wells that are in the field. The our first recommendation is to phase out everywhere that makes sense wells with single point of failure designs, so that if there is a failure, then there's a redundancy in the system so that the gas doesn't get out and cause incidents like what happened at Aliso. And then there should be a testing program, a rigorous testing program that looks at risks and uses multiple testing methods and criteria. Next slide. So our second topic is on risk management, and just the high points here. The recommendation is that you should have a comprehensive risk management plan that's reviewed periodically, and a good data collection and record storage system so that you can use that within your risk management plan to be able to both communicate that and to update as you get more information. And then topic 3 is on what R&D and data, additional data, would be helpful to get a better understanding of what are the issues with gas storage wells. And so there are a couple of different types of tools that we recommended that be tested better. So evaluate casing testing as well as downhole safety valves for their effectiveness to help you reduce the risk without causing any new ones, and to evaluate some of the other tools that might be used, both in terms of predicting how to better kill a well. And so, next slide, please. I think this is the last slide. Just gives some contact information and a link to the task force report if anyone's interested in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we're going to go to Dr. David Meyer, Senior Advisor with the Office of Electricity Delivery and Energy Reliability for the U.S. Department of Energy. David.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Berman. Well, I have just a few slides, and I'm sure people want to get on to the other aspects of this webinar. So let's go to the next slide, please. Yeah, as previous speakers have said, we have almost 400 active storage facilities in the United States. Most of these are in depleted oil and gas reservoirs. The remainder are in dry aquifers or caverns. But after the leak at Aliso Canyon, DOE tasked experts at Argonne National Lab to look at all of these operational storage facilities to estimate the likelihood of a sudden loss of functionality and the impacts of such a loss. Now, Argonne found that the likelihood of such outages is very small, but due to lack of appropriate data, they were not able to come up with the estimates of the likelihood of failure at specific facilities. And the link to Argonne's report is shown at the bottom. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the things that Argonne did was to collect data on safety incidents at storage facilities across the country. They found a total of 135 documented incidents. In general, the state-level incident data is quite limited. That is, most states do not collect such data on a consistent basis. They found that 7 underground storage facilities have experienced several incidents over a period of years. And perhaps significantly, in 9 states, no incidents were reported, although 22 underground gas storage facilities are in those states. So let's go to the next slide, please. The focus of Argonne's work in particular was to estimate the, first to identify storage facilities which, if lost, would put significant amounts of electric generation capacity at risk. So they found that Aliso Canyon is not unique in the sense of its ability to, or its connections with major amounts of generation. And they found that of the 400 underground storage facilities, about 60 of them have some capacity to affect available generation capacity if they were lost. But only 12 of those 60 appear to have the potential to affect 2 gigawatts or more of existing gas-fired generation. And that 2 gigawatt threshold was suggested to us by NERC. The working assumption is that for losses of generation less than 2 gigawatts, the generation owner or system operator should be able to deal with those losses without reliability impacts on consumers. But I want to emphasize that these numbers that I've just given you are essentially preliminary. That is, they are based on a screening tool that Argonne used. And so right now there is work going on, particularly with respect to those 12 storage facilities that I mentioned, to look more closely on the ground, if you will, to determine whether, in fact, if the storage facility in question were lost, would there be significant adverse reliability impacts in those particular cases? Because it's possible that backup arrangements of one kind or another are available, and so that more granular kind of analysis is underway right now. The largest predicted impacts from the loss of these storage facilities is shown in the size of the bubbles in this chart on this page, particularly in Louisiana and Mississippi, where underground gas is stored in caverns and quite large facilities, and so that potentially significant amounts of generation would be affected if those facilities became inoperable. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned work that NERC is doing. Let me give a little more detail about that. It quickly became apparent that although in Aliso Canyon the immediate focus was on the 400 other gas storage facilities, it was a wake-up call that says we need to look at all of the possible sources of disruption associated with the gas delivery system. And so NERC undertook an analysis in which they would look at pipelines, compressor stations, LNG terminals, and any other major facilities that could put deliverability of gas at risk, particularly with respect to generation. This NERC study, it will look, as I said, at the 12 facilities flagged earlier, the 12 storage facilities, but it's also going to look more broadly. And Argonne is helping again, screening these different kinds of facilities. But that's only the beginning, because once a smaller subset of facilities is identified that's of particular interest, then NERC will go ahead with the more granular analysis of the circumstances at those particular locations. So the scheduled date for this completion of the study is March, about a year from now. And so I urge you to bear that in mind and watch for the results from NERC when they come out. So that's that's the last of my slides, and I'll be happy to turn the mic over to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we'll turn it over to Alan Mayberry, Associate Administrator for Pipeline Safety with PHMSA. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Diane. And just to confirm, you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't so sure there, so okay. Again, I'm Alan Mayberry, and thank you, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about underground storage and where we are with implementing a rule that we recently reissued. And I'm joined today by Byron Coy, our Senior Technical Advisor. He's leading the effort at PHMSA as far as with implementation of our underground storage oversight program. And then also Zach Barrett, who's our Director of State Programs, who is focusing on the state side as far as implementation of this new program for us. So next slide. And some of this has already been covered, but but I think everyone understands the critical role that underground storage plays in our, the nation's energy supply portfolio. Certainly more recently with the advent of, new sources of or non-traditional sources. I guess now you would call them traditional sources in the current environment, with the shale gas plays and the like. There's just a lot of growing demand for natural gas, and also a growing demand to store that product. And as you can see, the storage has increased quite a good bit from 1995 to 2014. It's hard to imagine that only a few years ago we were looking at importing natural gas, and here we are with such an abundant supply. And of course, there you can see the value of the natural gas in storage. And moving on to the next. Just as far as the universe out there, we're dealing with about 124 companies or operators, about 4,800 BCF working capacity. About half of the 400 plus fields out there are intrastate, considered intrastate operators, and the other are the other 50% or 200 are interstate. And then this is their facilities in 31 states, of course, 17,000 wells, and on average about 41 wells per facility. Next slide. This really, in a pictorial, describes what Dave had gone over a little bit ago, and here you see kind of in a visual way that, by far more of the wells that are out there, storage wells, are depleted hydrocarbon reservoirs. Next slide. As you may know, when we were reauthorized last year in the Pipes Act of 2016, we were directed by Congress to establish regulations for underground storage. We've always had the authority to cover this area since the Natural Gas Pipeline Safety Act of 1968, but over the years and various efforts, we had not, extended our regulations downhole into storage facilities. We always, our regulations, at least the coverage of our regulations, really stopped at the manifold or the Christmas tree in the storage facility, and it would cover piping in the facility, but wouldn't go down hole. But as it was in 2016, we were directed to do so, and then later in 2016, in December, we issued the interim final rule, which is a tool we use when we want to get a final rule out quickly. It's followed by a comment period, but that's the quickest way we have to get out and regulate, in this case, a space that we weren't currently regulating. Now, I'll turn it over to Byron here in a second, but currently we're working on developing inspection criteria and also our training curriculum that we have at Oklahoma City, where our main training facility is located. And then we're looking to start new inspections in this area in the first quarter of 2018. So with that, I'll turn it over to Byron next, and I think then be followed by Zach. So take it away, Byron.
All right, the next slide there. With the interim final rule published now, we're full force preparing information, gathering up material to develop inspection criteria and the like. And a primary source of information for that naturally is the Aliso Canyon report. The IFR Alan mentioned, points by incorporation by reference to API standards, and that are the primary technical girth of the requirements in the interim final rule. We are drawing from the IOGCC, who's been out there, doing inspection and process, for a number of years. They generated guidance material first in 1995, and we're using that, and it's got a new updated version of the document coming out. We're going to use that as well. We've issued several advisory bulletins over the years. We'll draw from those. We intend into the second quarter here, maybe touch into the third quarter, making some what we're calling industry safety assessments to go out and see the current state of affairs about to what degree operators have been incorporating industry standards, and we'll be looking at that and drawing best practices from our visits, and then be able to fold that back into our inspection criteria. There's a limited number of incidents that have occurred, but we'll naturally be looking at those. And PHMSA does a research forum every year. This past October, the forum in Cleveland, you had 4 or 5 different session areas. One of them was underground gas storage, where we identified a handful of topics that both the regulators and industry believe will be prime targets for research development. And we're now anticipating getting proposals from researchers, particular topics, and we identify some good topic areas. We'll be hopefully be able to fund some of that work. Slide. So through the fourth quarter of 2016, we got the interim final rule out. We've established an implementation team. We put out 7 FAQs right after the rule came out to provide a little bit of guidance. We've made contact, with all the appropriate participants in the program, and you saw from the slide before. We recognize that we need more FAQs, to give a broader, more fulfilling guidance. And here in the first quarter, we've got those assembled now, and we're doing some last-minute final technical review of those, and then we'll be circulating them through hopefully getting a clearance to issue them that we don't have just yet. The fee structures are put in place here. The idea is we'll be recovering the cost of running the program from users' fees that are assessed to the operators out there. One of the important things we wanted to look at was the RP 7071, because that's the essence of the regulation, and compare that with the guidance material that the IOGCC has been using over the years. And we're still looking through that at this point. Slide. So going through the rest of 17, which is going to be the bulk of the development work, because till we get into 2018, we want to get out there and start the inspection process. So the second quarter, we'll get those industry assessments done. Hopefully we'll be able to award some research projects in targeted areas. And half of our training program will relate to the nature of operation and construction of underground gas storage for both state and federal inspectors. That's underway. We'll do some prototype inspections in the third quarter. hopefully targeting to do a public workshop then. Sort of brings everyone up to speed about where we're at and what the expectations will be when the inspections begin in 18. Get into the fourth quarter, we'll be rolling in the second half of the training program, which is how to conduct an inspection on these assets. And we'll bundle those two halves together in the first of the training that happened in 2018. When we get right at the end of the year as well, we'll be identifying our expectations for performance and execution of our program, and that'll get forwarded into our strategic and annual plans at that point. Slide. So when we get into 18, we do our first inspector training course. I'm sure there'll be several courses offered across 2018. The first initial inspections against the IFR will happen from both federal and state inspectors. And we'll be monitoring that activity and looking at the outcome of those early inspections for feedback to adjust our inspection criteria and make sure we're asking the right questions and getting the most value out of the inspections. In the third quarter, we'll have more outcome analysis we can perform based on the inspections that were conducted. And we have the possibility, if we think appropriate, to go back and relook at the criteria of the IFR and start a more formal, thorough, modified inspection process if that would seem to be necessary. But it's too soon to tell that just now. So I'm going to turn it over to Zach, and he'll pick up on the state certification program.
Great. State certification shouldn't be anything new to to our NARUC members. You guys have been doing it for well over 30 years in our pipeline safety program. So this should be real familiar to you. For underground storage, our program for states is going to mirror what we have established for our state-based grant on the pipeline safety side and how that looks. So as you know, we began accepting certifications in September of this year for the following inspection year, which would be calendar year 2018. The state certifications, to certify with us, you have to have the safety authority for the downhole facilities given to you, through your legislature. And if you have that, you adopt our minimum federal regulations. You have staff on hand and supportive of some of the data gathering and things in our program. Then you can certify with PHMSA to allow you to inspect to the federal minimum pipeline safety standards, those standards in the IFR that we're talking about, and to enforce and do the enforcement against that piece. And you also certainly can enforce any additional regulations that a state might have for the underground storage piece in excess of the minimum federal standards that are more restrictive. If a state cannot certify with us, they still can work with us through an agreement, and it's typically called a 6106 agreement. That agreement is usually put in place because you haven't had time to adopt our regulations yet. If that's the case, we would enter into this agreement. It would allow the state to conduct inspections, but PHMSA, any violations that were found, PHMSA would have to do the enforcement, of those facilities like that. So, again, this is usually where, a state cannot adopt our federal regulations in time to certify with us. And basically, again, it's a well-established program that we've been doing for years with states. We think that we'll have certainly new state partners for underground storage for the downhole portion. We think that certainly oil and gas commissions and Department of Natural Resources folks will have the safety authority for the downhole portion. So we're reaching out with LGCC and trying to begin some outreach with those folks. We'll be talking to NAPSR, the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives, which you guys are well familiar with. In our annual meetings coming up, we've been engaging the Grant Allocation Committee, and we've been talking about this with them for some time now. I really try to look for very few of our current state partners to, to certify with us for underground storage. The grant, there is some funding for a grant. Looks like there's about $6 million for the state underground storage program that we would set up, typically like we do the pipeline safety grant. It would be a formula grant and based on performance, where we would come, my staff would come and evaluate a state's performance of doing their inspections and the enforcement activities for the underground storage piece. And that tied with some progress reports, some data that we would gather for the past year's activities would tie together for a score that would help us distribute the grant money equitably among the states. So that's in a kind of nutshell how the state certification or agreements, the grant program would work. Next slide, please. So in just trying to sum up, looks like we might have skipped one, although I'm happy to talk to this one first and we can go back. Like I said, the state partner program is modeled after what we've done in the pipeline side for a long time now. We don't think it's going to be a heavy lift. We think we're set to be able to hit all of our milestones with that. The inspections will start 1 year after the effective date of the rule. So we're looking at January 2018 for the state and federal inspections to begin. And of course, initially, the state federal inspections will probably be more looking at the operators' procedures and their implementation plans for implementing those procedures in place, much like we did for gas integrity management that you guys may be familiar with. So, we look to work with states that are certified with us in conducting the beginning inspection, as Byron said, and to adjust our inspection protocols or inspection question set, as needed as we gain information and learn more. Next slide, please. Maybe we need to go back. Can we go back a couple of slides? One more back. There you go. The other point that we want to make that, this program, the underground storage program, has been closely coordinated with our executive management. We've kept them informed all along the way of our efforts here and what needs to be done and where we're at. A really key point, I think, for folks to hear, and we've said this from day one, and we continue to try to reinforce this, is that the minimum federal regulations, the IFR, does not impact any permitting or certificates that are currently in place. The fact that PHMSA has issued rules does not prohibit any permitting that a state program has authority to do in any shape, form, or fashion. So I just want to be sure that we're clear about that. We think it'll be about 3 to 8 years for the operators of the underground storage facilities to conduct a baseline well assessment to assess their tubulars and the facilities and take preventive and mitigated measures, to address any issues that the assessments might bring forward. And we're working on looking at some additional FAQs to allow for operators who have done prior assessments. In other words, if they've done prior activities to analyze the integrity of the well just recently, we want them to be able to take credit for those and not just have to do those again. So we're looking at that currently now. Okay, now if you can skip a slide and go to that web-based slide, I think we're there, web links. And this is just kind of the closeout here. This is where you can get additional information about operator notification to us, the event reporting, any major incidents, key documents, FAQ, the whole list of things there you can get at those web links. So I'd encourage you to take a little time and hit those links and see what's available. Next slide, please. And this is just our closeout. We certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with NARUC always. You're some of our closest partners in pipeline safety, your NAPSR counterparts that report to you and work with you. We're interested in continuing to have a close relationship, and I guess that we'd be open to answer any questions at this point.
Yep, thank you, Zach and Byron. We have a couple questions from Andreas Thanos from the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities. And if people could use the little raise hand icon in the webinar toolbar, I can then call on you and unmute you and you can ask your question. If that doesn't work for any reason, feel free to use the chat function and I can read your question out. So Andreas, you should have the floor.
Thank you, Kira. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your presentations. I have a couple of questions that relate to the storage facilities. And we are talking about 17,000 wells at about 415 storage facilities. There were two different slides. One said there were 3, including the Aliso Canyon storage facility. Another one said 4. So 4 major incidents that have been reported over the past 15 years. How significant are these incidents in terms of volume of or occurrence? For instance, as a percentage perhaps of regional consumption or methane emissions? Anyone?
This is Byron. We've been looking at those past incidents, saying some of them they're getting a little dated, and the amount of detailed information available for them is, sketchy. Mm-hmm. So we draw the information from the events as we can to get value and to learn from them, but we weren't able to do any kind of a detailed analytical review and potential impact, loss, like.
Yeah, so the one this is Grant. The one that I can tell you more about is the Moss Bluff in Texas in 2004. There was actually more gas lost in that one than in Aliso Canyon, but it was flared, so it sort of went up in smoke, but it happened over a very short period of time period in maybe a few days because that was a salt cavern. I'm not sure about some of the others.
So as a follow-up to that, what's the definition of major then? I'm trying to figure out in the grand scheme of things what makes a leak a major leak. Because let's say with oil, you may be able to measure the damage. You can see the damage in terms of methane emitted through a leak. It may be a little more difficult to evaluate. So what makes the major incident?
I don't think it's been well defined what's considered a major incident really. The two that I mentioned were ones where there was significant loss of property or loss of life associated with incidents.
Okay.
But I can maybe, I don't know if David wants to speak to the ones that he listed.
I'm sorry. Let me. I've been working on other things on a crunch project.
Aren't we all?
Yes. So rephrase the question, please.
Sure. What makes it? What defines it an incident? What identifies an incident as a major incident?
Well, for electric reliability purposes, the threshold that we've been using is that if the loss of the facility would affect 2 gigawatts or more of generation, then it rises to the level of something that affects or could affect local or regional electric reliability. Okay. Below that threshold, the assumption is that the local utility or grid operator can cope with that problem without disruption of service to customers.
Okay, thank you. That was one question, by the way. James, I have another question, and that's for you. You mentioned about, you talked about the low-cost sensing technologies that are being funded through the Monitor program. Are there any low-cost sensing technologies available right now? If no, just to simplify the question, what is at what stage of their development are those 11 projects that you mentioned in your slide?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess it depends on how you define low cost. Certainly, as you know, there are sensing technologies that are out there that are being used. I think being used throughout the supply chain, from production through distribution, and I think to many people those are too expensive to be deployed widely, I guess you could say. So I think that certainly the purpose of the RPE program is to bring down the cost so that it's easier to, it's more cost effective to more widely deploy those technologies. So let's just say that. So certainly there are a range of methane sensing technologies that are available and commercialized. And the idea is just to make them more ubiquitous and more accessible to any range of operators. So that's an important point. In terms of those 11 projects, I think there is one, and I wish I could remember the name of the technology, that is actually already commercial, even though the program just started, and I'll have to follow up with you on that particular question to get you the name of that technology. I can't remember which.
That's all right. Don't worry. I don't want to put you on the spot. I just, in case you had it. I know our paths will cross pretty soon again. So.
Indeed. Were there any other questions? Did I answer your questions?
Yes, thank you. And then I have a final question. It has to do with the certification. There has always been a question about inspector certification. So my question has to do with inspectors who would certify the storage facilities. How would they be certified? Would there be some sort of like regional, I don't want to call it traveling school, but let's call it for the purpose of this discussion, a traveling school. Would there be like a traveling school that will go by region, or would it be again a central location where engineers will have to go, or inspectors, I'm sorry, will have to go to get certified?
The certification we're talking about in the presentation was certifying with the state, and of course there'll be inspectors that are working for that state that will have training requirements as we develop those out that they need to to meet over a period of time. It won't be like today you have to have this or you're out. Over a period of time, we'll bring them through the training. We have a training facility. PHMSA has a training facility here in Oklahoma City, and that's currently where all your pipeline folks come. So I would expect that we'll have some core courses here. Certainly top core and some other areas have been mentioned that we're looking at also. I believe our director of training is looking at all sources yet, but I'm sure there'll be some core courses here. I'm sure we'll also make some webinar type coursework available also as we mature the program. But currently we're not really thinking of setting up a road show and carrying the training across the 31 possible states.
Great, thank you very much. I'm done with my questions, Kira. Thanks.
This is Byron. I had a follow-up. Just wanted to remind people that as the rules come into play here, we have a fairly elaborate reporting requirement. Annual report data and event reporting. So, as time goes by, we'll have a lot of data with streaming to us, and we'll have a lot more better pulse on what's out there and what's happening. So, in a year's time from now, or in the later 18, we have a lot more statistical information we could share with you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Candace Katie from Utah. I seem to be able to unmute you now, so if you have a question, feel free to ask.
Yes, Again, this is Candace Katie from Utah, and my question is, is it up to the operator to meet all the requirements of 1170, for example, for salt caverns? I am in the process of issuing Class 3 injection wells for the solution mining of caverns, and we're trying to figure out where our construction requirements begin and end, and where PHMSA's IFR begins and ends. Did you hear me?
Yep, we heard you. Do our PHMSA folks have anything to say on that matter?
We should probably take that offline. In looking at the IFR, and certainly currently there's nothing. If you have a permitting authority and you're having some construction, you're having some wells drilled, through your permitting authority, there's nothing that would stop anything from you requiring to do the permitting. The IFR, the operator certainly would have to comply with the, once the effective date hits, with the issues that are in the IFR that would involve construction. That's really the best I have for you right now. But, if you would contact Byron and give him some details, I'm sure we can, get you a good response.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hey, let me add one item to that too. This is Alan. That there's the federal minimum standard, which incorporates by reference the two standards, but the states obviously are allowed to go beyond that, and some do. So if that was an issue, that's just want to make clear that it's your prerogative to go beyond that standard as well.
Right. Well, we've already issued permits for the creation of caverns, and we've looked at a lot of different state regulations and other industry standards, and have kind of incorporated those requirements into the Class 3 injection well permit. But I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to incorporate the requirements of the IFR, and for our case, the API RP 1170. Or if that's just too much regulatory redundancy there. I think we're probably covered as far as a lot of the construction requirements under 1170, but we're just trying to make sure that we're not jumping into somebody else's territory.
The operator, with limited information we have at hand here, operator would have to comply with the contents of the IFR.
Yeah. Okay.
So you wouldn't necessarily have to put that into your permit that they have to comply, because they would have to comply anyway.
Okay. Well, then that's the answer I needed. Thank you.
And if it's an intrastate facility, you can add additional, I guess, requirements or limitations on the nature of what they're doing. And if it turns out that there's a conflict with what you've asked for, with what's in the IFR, I'm sure the operator will bring it to your attention.
Right. Well, I think we're dealing with an interstate, so yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we'll all be involved.
Right.
All right. Well, it's just a couple minutes past the hour, so I'm afraid we are out of time, and we'll need to wrap this up. But I will be sending around the slide deck from today, as well as a summary of the call, and a recording will also be available online if you'd like to share that with any colleagues. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to all our panelists from DOE and PHMSA, and have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.